This was back when I was about 8 to 10 years old, so my sister was about 4 to 6 years old. My memory isn't great from back then, but this is etched into my brain from all those years ago. My family lives in the San Francisco Bay Area, and my slightly older cousins and their family were visiting from Puerto Rico for a few weeks. Naturally, they wanted to go to the city. This was a weekday, so my dad was working, and my aunt and uncle decided to go up to the wine country for the day. That left my mother to drive and take care of 4 kids, all under 14 years old, in the city. The beginning of the day went well, and we all walked around doing the touristy stuff like eating taffy, going to the fisherman's and looking at the sea lions. We decided to stop for lunch at a small place near where the ferry launches to go to Alcatraz. We proceeded to sit and eat on some long cement bench things. One of my cousins and I ate our food and started goofing off, chasing each other around, being the stupid kids that everyone around probably hated. My mother, being the saint she is, was probably trying to let us burn off some energy and let us play, but kept an eye out. Now there's 4 of us, mind you, and 2 of us are being brats, so keeping an eye on everything was probably not the easiest thing, especially when we're all in different directions. I started running towards my mother, who was smiling in my direction. This is where the day turns. I'm watching all of this happen from maybe 20 to 25 yards away. My sister, while my mom was looking at me, stood up and started walking along the cement bench. She was maybe 5 feet from my mother, who had no idea she had even gotten up. This part especially is etched into my brain. A middle-aged woman, maybe 35, in a pink top walks up right past my mom and to my sister, picked her up from behind and just started walking away. My sister didn't make a sound, and I don't think she even really knew what was going on. When you're that age, you're always being picked up by somebody. I was watching this strange woman walk away with my baby sister. That's when my mother turned around, didn't see my sister behind her, and instead in the arms of some lady walking away. Now they say never get in the way of a mama bear and her cubs. This was no different. My mother dove on them, grabbing my sister and pushing the lady away. My mom began yelling and screaming at this lady who pretended she could only speak Chinese. The lady ended up running off before anyone even thought of calling the cops. My mom was just crying and holding my sister. My cousins and I were standing in disbelief, trying to process what just happened. Since then, my mother had been even more of a hawk over us whenever we went out in public until we were old enough to go out alone. This whole thing could have ended up terribly. I can only imagine what someone would want with a young girl. This world is really messed up, and people like this lady deserve to be in hell. I became more vigilant and vowed to protect my sister no matter what. Whenever I'm out with her, which isn't very often because I live far away on my own, I still don't let her out of my sight. There's creeps everywhere, and she's still just a kid at 18. I was kidnapped at 6. I remember I was sitting in my mother's minivan, playing a fighting game on my Game Boy while she was pumping gas. She had left the keys in the ignition so I could have AC while I waited. Next thing I know, a man yanked the door open, jumped in the car, and then sped off with me still in the back seat of the vehicle. I started crying loudly at the top of my lungs. I guess he didn't really like that very much because he kept trying to reach back towards me, screaming at me to shut up. After 5 minutes or so of me hollering constantly, we entered a residential area and he told me to get out of the car. Of course, I immediately took the opportunity and jumped out. I wandered around the unfamiliar neighborhood for I don't know how long, still crying and feeling a bit hopeless in the midst of everything. A small grey jalopy eventually approached me with its windows rolled down. There was a small family inside, and the dad asked me what was wrong. I explained the situation the best I could, including a general description of the gas station where my mom would be. Luckily, he knew the location and was nice enough to drive me there, but my mom was nowhere to be seen, so my 5-year-old mind rationalized that she must be at home without me. I gave the man directions to my house, only a few minutes from the gas station. When I arrived, I knocked at my front door, but there was no response. The man talked to his wife for a little bit and then asked if I'd like to go back to the gas station again, and I said yes. On our second trip back, I noticed a police car talking to my mom. I jumped out of the car and ran to her, crying all over again. I was kidnapped when I was 10. If you've ever seen Mystic River, it was a lot like that. 3 men in suits convinced me that they were police officers and they had badges, or at least they looked enough like badges to me at such a young age. They told me that my mother was hurt and they were going to take me to the hospital. They were super detailed. They knew my mother's full name and the name of everyone in my family. They approached me asking, "Son, can you confirm that you are Merriwell?" and then provided me with the information about my family to make me feel secure. They drove me to what ended up being just outside the city, opened the door, and that's the last thing I remember from right there. I woke up in a padlocked dog cage, naked. The first 24 hours, they just kept hosing me down, so I was constantly wet and crying. They would never smile or laugh that day, and barely even spoke, just the hose and staring. The next day was when the assault and abuse started. They would force me from the cage after I made it clear I wasn't cooperating and did things I constantly tried to forget, and I don't really feel like anybody would be better off hearing about. The third and final day was when the talk of the chase started. This is when the laughing that taunts my mind started. I hear that laughter every day in my head. They spray painted me red as best as they could while I was in the cage and told me that if I was nice and good, then they wouldn't hurt me as bad as they did before. I finally accepted their terms and told them I was sorry for being bad and that I loved them. It's what they had been asking me to do the entire time. The smallest of them gave me a hug, and the next thing I remember, I was being woken up in the back of a different car than the one that they had taken me in. The small one told me that it was time for the end and that he wasn't going to hurt me before I ran. He opened the door and I sprinted. I was in a very hilly area, but it was butted up against really thick trees. They all started laughing and I heard a gunshot. I bolted for the trees and made it in there before them. I stayed super close to the tree line, and as soon as I thought they were all in the trees, I snuck back towards where we came from. I never heard them after that. I went to a road and found some houses. The first 3 doors I knocked on didn't answer, and I know for a fact one of them was home. I saw them look at me through the window. Finally, the 4th house, a woman opened the door and I ran into her house. I just started crying. The rest is very basic. Getting back with the family, the police investigating, no one ever being arrested or punished. Once about 5 years ago, I thought I saw a guy that looked like one of the 3, but the news report was about him being killed by the police after a traffic stop where he pulled a gun on the cop. So I never really got to find out anymore. So that's my story. I was scared, I was tired. I tried so hard to believe that I was going home, but by the end of the 2nd day, I knew I was going to die. I started trying to think of ways that I could take one of them with me. I wanted them to die with me. I wanted someone to be punished. It all haunts me pretty bad still, and I honestly feel like I'm incredibly well adjusted for all of it, and no one other than my fiancé and a few close friends know about it. I have a few things that still really get to me. I can't be wet for an extended period of time, and when I am wet, I prefer the water to be incredibly hot. The words "I hate you," even in a joking fashion, really set me off. I break down hard because regardless of who says the words, I hear those men. I've had a few mental snaps in the last few years where I shut down and can't speak for a few days, and I hear the laughing. I wish I didn't.